Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I compliment the young lady from Nevada, even though you sound like you're from Mississippi with your accent. Let me just say that we've had about 4.5, 5 hours of hearing today on this so-called impeachment. It's unfortunate because we've not heard any solutions being offered in the course of this hearing. And because of that, whatever the problem is will still be there unless we as Democrats and Republicans come together and work on solutions. But I'd like to start by thanking our witnesses for being here today and share their stories and expertise. Losing a loved one to drugs or violence is devastating, and our hearts go out to you and your families. Most of us here are family people, and we can only give you our prayers for the devastating loss that you've incurred. But I want to make sure that the record is clear. Secretary Mayorkas informed the majority last week of his scheduling conflict for today. And I'm sorry if the majority neglected to share that information with our witnesses. I'd also want to make very clear that Democrats are committed to enacting policies that will actually address these issues. Impeaching Secretary Mayorkas will do nothing to prevent other families from suffering similar tragedies. If only it were that simple. These problems are not new. They will require serious policy making. Not an impeachment vote will do nothing but undermine our constitutional system. If my Republican colleagues were serious about addressing these issues, they would be working on legislation, collaborating with our Senate counterparts and the White House. Right now, Congress has a pending request from President Biden to fund additional Border Patrol agents, additional law enforcement personnel, and increased fentanyl detection technology. House Republicans have refused to consider this request. Instead of pursuing solutions to these problems, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are chasing an illegitimate impeachment and using tragedy to score political points. This entire process has been conducted in bad faith with a predetermined outcome. It's clear from my earlier parliamentary inquiries that the chairman has not established any due process or procedures for this sham of an impeachment, and the majority has refused to work with the department to find a day and time to hear from Secretary Mayorkas, despite his offer to do so. Let's not forget that my Republican colleague forced their border bill, H.R. 2, through this committee without considering any Democratic input, resulting in a bill full of unworkable provisions that would create chaos on the southwest border. They know as well as anyone that H.R. 2 never had a chance of becoming law. Senate Republicans and Democrats are working together in a bipartisan manner and with the direct involvement of Secretary Mayorkas to try to fix the issues raised here today. Yet instead of joining that conversation and using the powers of the Congress to create change, House Republicans are pursuing a partisan impeachment effort that will achieve nothing. Perhaps this is because a bipartisan reform bill would take away from a Republican political talking point. As one Republican member told CNN earlier this month, he has no interest in trying to pass border legislation that might help Joe Biden's approval rating. And that's really what this impeachment sham is all about. A political game to make it seem like the do-nothing Republican caucus, achieved something while attacking the Biden administration. And it's the American people that are paying the price of Republican inaction. This impeachment hearing just distracts from the important work that DHS is doing to secure the border and enforce immigration laws. So let me share some of that work. From May to September of 2023, DHS removed or returned at least 360,000 non-citizens from the United States, more than any other 5-month period in the last 10 years. From April 2022 to September 2023, DHS arrested nearly 17,000 suspected human smugglers and seized more than $13 million in currency. And in fiscal year 2023, DHS stopped over 43,000 pounds of fentanyl from entering the country, resulting in over 5,600 arrests. President Biden has requested the necessary funding, but Republicans would rather shut down the entire federal government than give President Biden another win. Mr. Chairman, what other conclusion can the American people draw but that House Republicans don't actually want to fix the problem on our southern border? The Constitution gives Congress broad and expansive powers to create laws and shape the policies we want to see. It gives us strong tools to perform oversight over the execution of those policies. Yet, that's not what we've seen here today. Those real levels of power don't seem to be flashy enough for my Republican colleagues. They don't want to do the hard work of creating workable laws or collaborating or compromising. It's far easier to demand impeachment instead of engaging in a good faith effort to improve Homeland Security. House Republicans are more interested in giving interviews on Fox News. As Professor Pearlstein has explained today, there's no constitutional basis for impeaching Secretary Mayorkas. We heard the same from Professor Bowman last week, and we heard the same from the many other constitutional law experts that have written our committee. There's reason they have not brought a constitutional expert to testify in support of this impeachment. There are no constitutional basis for impeachment. Democrats will continue to keep our focus throughout this sham impeachment on what our obligations are under the Constitution. As I said last week, Mr. Chairman, when your members are ready to work and to use the actual power given to us by the framers to address policy problems, I guarantee you House Democrats will do our best to work with you. But until then, we'll continue to call out this do-nothing approach. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I would like to spend my closing statement reviewing why we've held impeachment proceedings against Secretary Mayorkas, since my Democrat colleagues still don't seem to get it. Secretary Mayorkas has willfully and systematically refused to follow immigration laws written by Congress. Indeed, he has unilaterally created policies that violate the statutory provisions of the immigration laws related to enforcement. In fact, most courts that have actually heard relevant arguments and decided on the merits agree. The problem is, when the arguments on enforcement went to the Supreme Court in the United States versus Texas, the court refused to decide the matter. The court said it was not subject to judicial review, and they pointed Congress to remedy via impeachment. The court said, if the states can't get relief from the courts, they can get relief from Congress, who can impeach the offending official. Well, now Congress is the proper forum to resolve this dispute. We now have to decide, does the legislation enacted by the people's duly elected representatives mean anything? Or can can the Secretary just do whatever he wants in direct contradiction to the mandatory language in federal law with impunity? I argue that he cannot continue to not follow the law without consequences. This isn't a policy difference. This is a matter of following the laws written by Congress, and thus a matter of constitutional significance. Today's minority witness recognized back in 2019 that someone could be impeached for a breach of trust. James Madison, the primary architect of the Constitution, was elected to the House of Representatives to serve in the first Congress. At that time, a bill was proposed to create a Department of Foreign Affairs, now the State Department. Concerns were raised that if Congress created such a department, it could be filled by people who abused the public trust. Madison worried about it, and I quote, "the difficulty of displacing those who are unworthy of the public trust," end quote. But he pointed to a solution for that concern. He said on the House floor, and I quote, "if an unworthy man be continued in office by an unworthy president, the House of Representatives can at any time impeach him, and the Senate can remove him whether the president chooses or not," end quote. Now, I don't know about you, but I trust the interpretation of the father of our Constitution more than the interpretation of those desperate to defend the indefensible for political gain. The president has chosen to continue to keep an unworthy man in office, and it is now the duty of the House of Representatives to impeach Secretary Mayorkas and the Senate to remove him from office. The minority witness said we could pass laws to address these issues. But to what end? The Secretary has already shown he will not follow the laws passed by Congress. Secretary Mayorkas has consistently and deliberately violated duly enacted laws under the Immigration and Nationality Act that Congress has put into place to protect Americans and guard our nation's sovereignty. Secretary Mayorkas has refused to comply with court orders regarding those very laws in good faith. Additionally, Secretary Mayorkas has on numerous occasions lied or misled the United States Congress and the American people regarding the existence and scale of the border crisis that he created. Secretary Mayorkas told the House Judiciary Committee on April 2022 that he had operational control of the southern border, according to the definition laid out by the Secure Fence Act. By the way, that definition was passed into law by Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. And of course, Secretary Mayorkas' own former Border Patrol chief testified before this committee in March of last year that according to the statute, DHS does not have operational control. Secretary Mayorkas' pure dishonesty was on full display. Again, not a policy issue. To those claiming this impeachment hearing is against the Constitution and against the separation of powers, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas are the ones who have trampled on the Constitution and the separation of powers by ignoring a co-equal branch of government. As far as I understand the Constitution I swore an oath to at age 17 on the plane at West Point, Congress writes the laws and the executive branch executes those laws. But that is exactly, absolutely not what Secretary Mayorkas has been doing when it comes to our country's immigration laws. In fact, he's been spitting on those laws and thus the Constitution in the last 3 years. Impeachment is our final remedy. We're left with no other choice. This is also not a resource issue. Democrats are wrong when they claim that the reason this border crisis is happening is because there aren't enough resources at the border and that Republicans have refused to fund the Border Patrol. First of all, House Republicans have voted substantial increases in funding for CBP above the president's requested amount. In fact, funding the Border Patrol operations and related Southwest border requirements increased $2.2 billion since FY 2021. Additionally, House Republicans in the FY 24 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, where we fund the government, increased border security funding again above the president's proposed budget. On top of this, H.R. 2, the Secure Border Act, would fund a Border Patrol force of 22,000, Yet, did any Democrat here vote for that? No. It's the definition of hypocrisy. Secondly, Secretary Mayorkas actually asked for less money each year to fund detention. The one thing that is a deterrent to people coming and making that trek. Third, it won't matter how many resources we have at the border if the policies don't change and follow the laws written by Congress. President Biden's supplemental package would do nothing to secure the border between ports of entry, and it would do nothing to stop the flow of migrants to our border. No, every cent of Biden's supplemental package would go directly toward funding mass catch and release policies. That is a non-starter. That's what's created the crisis in the first place. This is clearly not an issue of funding. DHS had less funding under the Trump administration for border security, yet our border was far more secure. Funding Biden's supplemental package won't fix the crisis at the border. It will fund it. Again, it's not a funding problem. Secretary Mayorkas' complete disregard for the laws passed by Congress have had a devastating impact. That's what we learned today. Everyone knows the numbers. As one Texas sheriff has said, and I quote, "It's quite frankly a tsunami of death that has crashed into the United States over our southern border. It's killing Americans wholesale, and it's just an epic slaughter manufactured by the cartels. If you don't secure the border, it is going to continue," end quote. Slaughter is the right word to describe what fentanyl is doing to our country, to our young people, to many of our sons and daughters. What else do you call 100,000 overdose deaths in 2021? And a comparison was made earlier today between incarceration rates of native citizens and immigrants. Well, whatever that is, it misses the point that every crime committed by anyone who's here illegally is a completely preventable crime. If you shut the border, those lives are saved. To prevent those crimes, you need only enforce the immigration laws on the books, which is exactly what Secretary Mayorkas is willfully not doing. This hearing is titled "Voices for the Victims," the heartbreaking reality of the Mayorkas border crisis. Tammy Noble's daughter, Kyla Marie Hamilton, no longer has a voice. Josephine Dunn's daughter, Ashley Marie Dunn, no longer has a voice. That's why we held this hearing today. It is our duty to be the voices of those who can't speak for themselves and to demand accountability on their behalf. And finally, to Secretary Mayorkas, who couldn't be bothered to show up today. Secretary Mayorkas, you have one job: follow the laws and secure the homeland. Yet you allow criminal aliens to walk across our border, to spit in the face of our country's laws, and to exploit vulnerable migrants. Secretary Mayorkas, you have one responsibility: follow the law and secure the homeland. Yet you allow massive amounts of fentanyl to flow across the border and poison tens of thousands of Americans. Secretary Mayorkas, you have one duty: to follow the law and secure this homeland. Yet you refuse to let our Border Patrol do its job and keep criminal aliens from coming across the border, or allow ICE to deport all criminal aliens when caught. You had one job, one responsibility, one duty, and you have refused to fulfill it. Over and over again, you have refused to follow the laws and to secure our homeland, yet you shrink your responsibility. This is utterly disgraceful. Now, I'd like to make a few other points. Someone today has made a point, I can't recall if it was a member or the minority witness, that if you remove the secretary, there'll be no change because they'll just put another guy in there like that. Well, I have a duty to the people of Tennessee and the people of America that if we have a lawless cabinet secretary who refuses to obey the laws written by Congress and who refuses court orders to cease and desist, totally disrespecting the two other equal branches of government in our Constitution, I have a duty under the Constitution to remove him. And it doesn't matter if the devil I don't know is worse than the devil I do. My duty is to remove him, and I will do my duty. There have been some, I think, we'll say disingenuous comments about our efforts to get Mr. Mayorkas here today. We have tried for months and months to get him to come and testify on the border issues. The only time he's come is when he's constitutionally or legally mandated to present the national threats briefing. He came with the director. I was glad he was here for that. He has not worked with me to be here. In fact, today he decided to meet with some Mexican officials who come from Mexico instead of being present at this hearing. That ought to tell you where his priorities are. Now, some people have suggested, of course, that we could pass some more legislation. Well, again, I did say, what's the use if he's not going to abide by it? But you know what? H.R. 2 sits over there on the other side of the building. Well, actually, it's that way. I'm not directionally challenged. It's that way. Amend it. Take the parts you don't like out of it. I think that's the process. And then it comes back over here. We go to conference committee and we work it out. You don't just sit and leave it sitting on a desk and say, you're not writing legislation. Well, yeah, we sent it to you. And the process is you amend it in your committee, vote on that amended version in the Senate, and send it back to conference. So don't sit there and say we haven't done anything. That was months ago. And I have to address the ranking member's suggestion that we would use these young women as political pawns to make a political statement. I am offended by that. His closing remarks could have been made at a political rally. It's despicable to suggest that I would use the two of you as political stunts. I'm trying to show that every American is unsafe right now with these ridiculous border policies. What happened to you ladies and your daughters could happen to any American. And the reason they've happened is because the secretary isn't following the laws passed by this body, both Republicans and Democrats. And if he were a Republican, I'd be saying the exact same thing. Has nothing to do with politics for me. Spent 24 years prepared to give my life for this country. And at times I thought I might have. No, what matters to me is that document that I swore an oath to defend. And this secretary has spit on it by saying that co-equal branches of government don't matter to him. I'm sorry, he's got to go. I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittees may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask that the witnesses respond to those in writing pursuant to Committee Rule 7D. The hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, the ranking member is recognized.
You know, we've talked several times about the rules, and we can disagree. We're Democrats and Republicans. But I call your attention to House rules that you referenced my comments that they were despicable. That's against House rules.
Actually, calling you despicable would be against House rules. Calling your words despicable are not. I can even say it's dishonest what you said. I can't say you're a liar. It's very clear, and I've made that distinction before, actually gaveling down comments made by a Republican. She actually, in that case, called the secretary a liar. She didn't say, others have said that those words are dishonest or that's a lie. You can say that. You can't say the individual is a liar. Your words were despicable. Well, I didn't say anything about you personally.
Well, then I'm clear, as long as you didn't make Bennett Thompson.
Yeah, I would never say that about an individual sitting in this committee.
Thank
but I was very disappointed with your accusation that I would use these individuals as political pawns.
Mr. Chairman, your disappointment is fine, but one of the tenets of who we are as a democracy is that I have an opinion, and you have an opinion, and let's respect that. And so, as long as you understand that we don't have to, we can disagree on the words. I was just trying to get clarification about that. And since you say you wasn't talking about me specifically, then I'm fine. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The committee stands adjourned.